Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, I am honored to welcome the author of the book, Spin Cycle, Notes from a Reluctant Caregiver, Alfredo Botello. Welcome, Alfredo. How are you?
I'm good, Lance. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. You know, most of the times, Alfredo, when we have authors on that have written a book about caregiving or their story about a parent or a spouse that had health issues, it's usually a nonfiction piece of work. But I just said that this is a novel. So let's start with what prompted you or inspired you to write a novel about Notes from a Reluctant Caregiver and Spin Cycle.
Right. So it was inspired by the experiences I had with my mom, Lisa. About 5 years ago, she was diagnosed with likely onset Alzheimer's. And I want to say the year or two before that were brutal. I felt blindsided. I felt overwhelmed. I didn't understand the changes that were happening with mom. You have to understand, my mom, Lisa, single mom, was just an absolute kick-ass mom when I was growing up in the 70s. So after her divorce, she took up belly dancing lessons. She went on Sierra Club hikes. She went to Toastmasters. Not that she had a job as a public speaker. I mean, she's a first-generation immigrant, so it wasn't even her native tongue, English. But she still wanted to be there. She just loved life, and she was so competent. Just this very organized German woman. And suddenly, the woman I had known for 56 years, there were these personality changes I just didn't understand. So, I mean, something as simple as the fridge calendar. She had a calendar on the side of her fridge where she would write down whatever was going on that day. It could be a doctor's appointment. It could be a hair salon appointment. It could be taking my stepdad to dialysis. Organized her life. She ran it beautifully. And I remember her looking at it just confused and upset and turning to me and saying, I just can't get it together. And I wasn't sympathetic. I wasn't warm. I was just like, Mom, what's wrong with you? I was irritated. And those feelings of guilt and resentment and anger, I wasn't proud of them. I felt ashamed. And when we finally got the diagnosis, after rounds and rounds of trying to figure this out on our own and going to the doctor, I finally got some insight. Oh, something is happening that is not just me, my perception. So, but all those feelings I had and continue to have, especially the difficult ones, prompted me to write this book, because I feel when I read something, whether it's a poem on the back of a cocktail napkin or a 1,000-page history book, if a character says or does something that I feel inside, I feel comforted. Like I'm not alone. There's a kind of resonance there. So I wrote this book because if someone reads it and feels like, oh my gosh, that character is saying something that I feel, that's exactly how it really is, and no one's talking about it, because part of it is I do feel the emotional side of being a caregiver is not as discussed as I would like it to be. Right. And the reason I chose fiction, which you pointed out, because yes, there's a good amount of maybe memoirs or sort of bullet point how to be a good caregiver. The freedom in the novel is that I could come up with, and the structure is that a guy is opening up a storefront school to be a more patient caregiver. And there's 9 or 10 students, and each of their stories and each of their viewpoints, I was able to kind of cover all the facets of caregiving and the feelings I had when I could invent 9 or 10 characters, because not everyone is going to have the exact same experience. And then I also feel like there's an important character, which is the protagonist's brother, who has a very different view on how you take care of mom than the protagonist. And he's kind of I would call the id character, the one who kind of gets away with murder. He's kind of the slacker. He can say and do things that are maybe that polite people like me wouldn't say, but we might feel. So fiction compared to nonfiction gave me that freedom to explore, like I say, all different aspects of the emotional side of caregiving.
That's interesting. And I find it interesting because I feel like you're telling your story, but you're telling it through different people in different ways. Is that fair to say?
Right. I think of it like facets on a jewel. Like it's the same jewel, but you just tilt it and oh, maybe it catches the light a little differently. And so each of these people will have views and, you can span things. Some of them have life stories where they are grounded in religion. Others don't have any religion at all. Some are younger in their 20s who happen to sort of inherit a family member who's got some dementia. Others are older. Others are worried that they themselves are heading into it. So I could explore more with a variety of people. And then just as a fiction writer, as a novelist, as a screenwriter, I just enjoy putting a group of people together who are going to agree and disagree and have different voices and styles of speaking and viewpoints on the same thing. And so rather than trying to have 20 voices in the same character's head, it's easier to spread them out and have different people speaking. So that's what I found in it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I want to go back to something you mentioned about your mom that I wasn't aware of previously.
Yeah.
She was taking your stepdad to dialysis, so your mom was a caregiver.
Yeah, this was one of the big aha moments for me in this whole process. So my stepdad, who passed away 2020, I want to say, he had multitudes of health issues, bodily health issues. He was 89. In the last 10 years or so of his life, dialysis, kidney failure was number one, but he had sort of different types of cancer. He went through COVID a few times. He had bladder problems. He had all kinds of problems. But my mom was always the one getting him to appointments. So in my mind, it was real simple. Stepdad sick, mom healthy. She's the caregiver.
Yeah.
And that was it. I had a very clear image. But when he passed, and it happened, Lance, I want to say almost immediately, I saw she was kind of in a panic and very lost. And of course, yeah, she's grieving a man who she was married to for 26 years. Of course, that's going to be part of that. But there was more happening there. If she felt her heart rate, because at the time I'm in Northern California. She lived in Southern California. So for the first 3 months, I just spent it together with her. Either brought her with me here or stayed there. But I saw that she would be trying to call 911 if she felt her heartbeat raising. And if there were times I wasn't there, then the call would go through and the ambulance would pick her up. And invariably, by the time she got from her condo to the hospital, the heartbeat was no problem. And it just dawned on me because my stepdad, Jim, who was a man of few words, would say to me often toward the end, "You will take care of mom, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, well, that's not even a question. I mean, she's my mom." But I think what he was trying to tell me then in his own way was there's more going on with your mom. And it just, the light bulb went on after he passed that, no, it's not that he's sick, she's healthy. They were supporting each other. I think he
Was a caregiver.
he was talking her down. So when she had panicked feelings about her heart, or when she, like it happened with me, when she misplaced her car somewhere and was right in front of her, but she was so, I think, worked up, she couldn't see it, or he was there taking care of it. And I didn't realize that they were both caregivers, like, because hers was an invisible one.
Right.
Yes, you could see. You go to dialysis for five days a week, and that's very clear. But when he was gone, I just realized that he had been doing a lot of the work too, and now that was in my hands. And now I understood why he said in kind of a cryptic, strange way that you will take care of your mom. And so that was the big aha moment, is that they were both doing it.
Wow. It's fascinating. I want to talk about, most people don't plan to be caregivers. You were kind of watching your mom, and then you find out, Jim, kind of from the peripheral, that they're caring for each other, but you don't give it a lot of thought. You probably didn't think about all the intricacies about bills being paid, meds being taken, all of these things. In what ways did you expect what was coming when you did become a caregiver?
Almost nothing. Okay. I was completely overwhelmed. And I want to just say that in my mind, I contrast it with, it's like when you were having a baby. I mean, from the time you're a little kid, you're playing, especially it's probably a little bit more gender neutral now, but you're playing with dolls. You're pretending to change diapers. You're told you're probably going to have a kid in your 20s or 30s or 40s. There's 9 months of pregnancy. There's a zillion books. There's Lamaze classes. So we're primed for that.
Right.
So if there was that same thing happening, for the fact that most of us are going to have an unexpected child, only they're probably going to be in their 60s, 70s, or 80s, and you're going to be a parent again. I just feel that wasn't there. So I had no real awareness that this was going to happen. So there was a lot of improvising and just winging it and trying to just, I don't know, shift and adapt to the new normal. So I didn't have big expectations. I didn't know what was coming until it happened.
Did it end up, and we got more questions, but I just want to jump ahead and I don't want to spoil it. Were the surprises, like, in what ways were you surprised or blindsided? Like, what was your, I guess, what was your preconceived notion, if you had any, going into it versus what the reality was? What surprised you the most or blindsided you that you didn't see coming or expect?
It's the variation day to day of what happens. So I think, oh, when I hear dementia, I think, you're wandering in a circle. You don't know where you are. You're eating soap. I don't know. I just kind of these crazy ideas. And what I discovered in it is that that mom could be different things on different days, and even within the same day. So there are days where she would absolutely surprise me with a clear, cogent, funny response. So if mom asks me, "Hey, I want to get my nails done," I can guarantee you she will remember that until, like, if I say I can't do it that day, the next visit, she will not forget. That will be absolutely tip-top priority. On the other hand, she might call me her brother Joe, who passed away 20 plus years ago. And it's not just, it's not one steady decline or upward tick. It's the mix of things. And so which kind of leads me into the sense that, and it's hard for me because I'm a half German Virgo, so I like to plan and I like things fixed. But the hardest thing and the most important thing I've had to learn is kind of the old sports cliche, which is you take what the defense gives you. Yeah, you might have your plan A, that's fine, but you've got to be ready to pivot. You've got to be ready to take it as it comes, and that can be hard because you have like I said, I had a fixed idea of who my mom was, which is a very independent, strong, amazing person who worked 2 jobs to put me through private school, who did a zillion things, and suddenly she wasn't that person quite the same.
And how did you handle that as her son?
Poorly in the beginning, I think I wasn't very compassionate. I think I was short-tempered. I remember just saying, what is wrong with you? How can, like, I made a little checklist, a daily checklist for her meds, where it would say breakfast, lunch, dinner, bedtime. And I kept trying to simplify this thing with boxes to check. And I was with her, and she would check a box, and I'd go, "Oh yeah, good, Mom." And then she would ask me, "Did I take the pill?" And I'm like, "Well, I can't tell you if you took the pill. Only you can tell you if you took the pill." So I had to realize that even the act of putting the pill in your mouth, picking up the pen, and writing off the check, those are many steps in there that we all kind of take for granted. So that was something that I had to learn as I went through, and it was tough in the beginning. But the biggest thing I kind of eventually came up with, and this was to me kind of the breakthrough moment, which is people with dementia, even just the normal difficulties of aging, they're not broken adults. They're just different. But that is a huge thing to realize, because I think I began with the idea, even if I didn't consciously say it, that something was broken, and if it's broken, that means it's wrong. That's a problem. That's A, that it's a problem, and B, that you can somehow fix it. So if you approach somebody with that attitude, you're already kind of in a judgmental, angry, frustrated place.
Right.
And and it took help. It took people telling me and my own just experience to realize, well, wait a minute, that's crazy, because with a 3 or 4 year old, I'm not expecting them to file their taxes. And mom has plenty of wonderful, like right now, like I always say, oh gosh, isn't it great? I think how many religious or philosophical belief systems say the greatest thing in the world is to truly be in the moment, to not be encumbered by past regrets or anxiety about the future. I think most of us want to get there. My mom is there. She's like a Buddha. She's figured that out. Like when we go to Starbucks and she's fussing, and she does this all the time. If any toddler or baby comes in, I mean, she's just mesmerized, and she'll go over and just ask the person, "Oh, what's the name?" And it's interesting. It's so heartening. I've never seen a mom or a dad with a little kid not intuit that something's going on with my mom, and that she just she's maybe staying and fussing 30 seconds too long than most people would say, oh, cute baby, and move on. My mom will be there like, oh, and just smiling because she's right there with the baby. And it's, or with, like, I show her videos on YouTube of puppies and kitties, and she just laughs. It's like, I'm like, wait a minute, when is the last time I was able to just laugh at something so it's that to me goes to this thing, like, they're not broken, they are different. And not only are they different, there are some things that I could learn from. Like, if I could be a little bit half that wise or half that present, I think I'd be a lot happier.
That's a beautiful analogy and observation, Alfredo. I think people, but it goes back to what you originally said, and I've said it so many times. You plan, you prepare, you educate for having a baby, but you don't for becoming a caregiver. It's just not on anybody's list. And when it gets there, then you don't know what to do. And then, we're us being human, we're not able to see what we're dealing with because we don't know what we're dealing with, right? What advice do you wish that you had received before you found yourself in this new role of being a caregiver for mom? There's probably several things, I'm guessing.
There are probably several things. Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things I wish I had known was, this is now kind of from my own, the emotional difficulties that I have with it, is when you're ready to beat yourself up for being less than you thought you could be. Like, if I go and, like I say, if I'm snippy with mom, and then afterwards I'm just racked by guilt, which happens all the time, and I feel like I'm just worthless, right? I asked myself, wait a minute, if my best friend, my girlfriend, said to me, oh gosh, Alfredo, I just came back from a visit with mom and I just can't believe it. I threw her keys on the table because she lost them again. Or she said that somebody stole her glasses, which is insane. I told her that's ridiculous. And why would anyone care? I mean, whatever the thing is that maybe you're feeling bad about, if they told me that, I would definitely, I can kind of forgive them. I can say, don't worry. I mean, you're just trying. So learning to apply that same level of, I guess, compassion is the word for it, to myself, that would be a big deal, because I think I would, not to let myself off the hook, but just to understand that I'm not perfect. I can be good. I can be bad. I can be both. That's a huge one. So that's one of the biggies. And then the other piece of it, and this is more about the changes in our loved ones, is, and this is a very practical one, is really figure out what disagreements or arguments are worth having. This is just grounded. This is not a big theoretical, philosophical thing, but I did find myself, I couldn't help it. I would correct my mom if she said I was her brother who had died. I'm like, no. Or if she thought somebody was visiting who was gone, same thing. And as this happened, I would always go to the drugstore and I would buy her little red, she likes the color red and blue. So if I could find red or blue reading glasses for her, I'd get them. And then she would invariably misplace them. And at that point, she was in assisted living, and she would sometimes blame a caregiver, saying, I'm not going to let her in anymore. She took them. And I would argue with her. Like, that's no, there's no, I would say something like, well, what are they going to do? Go try to sell them for 50 cents on the street? Are they missing a pair? Are they just going to laugh in the break room and smash them? I mean, she couldn't even, the verbal capacity wasn't there to kind of understand my stupid sarcasm, but I realized those arguments are just, they're pointless. Right. It's absolutely pointless. And it's because even if you can be right, but you can, is it worth the aggravation? Is it worth the tension between the two of you? It's not. So now on my best days, when I remember to do this, and I wanted to say, Lance, yeah, all of these things I'm saying, let's remember there's a giant asterisk here, which is these are aspirational. Right. I like to get there. Some days I do, some days I don't. So I'm not here to say, look, I'm perfect now. I figured it all out. No. Totally a work in progress. I think I'm a little better than I was 5 years ago. Then that's probably why I wrote the book. Is the book is about all of us, very flawed people, just stumbling. Hopefully we're stumbling in the right direction, and that's good enough. But anyways, so now if my mom says the same thing, hey, I think the girl came in and she took the glasses, I'll say, you know what? Let me look into that.
Yeah.
And then I'll just go on. And you know what? And by the time I'm back. Either I've found them or she's possibly forgotten about them. And if she's genuinely lost them, we'll replace them. That is so much less grief and tension in my stomach than fighting with it. Or if she calls me her brother, okay, so what? It's a different name. And because, chances are maybe in an hour, it won't be the same. Again, the shift, the kind of, even within the day, the shifting of perception, she'll call me Chato, which is my nickname in the family. So why make a point of that? It just, there's no upside. I mean, there are some things there are, like, so my mom at one point fell back to back within the same weekend, breaking one wrist and then breaking the other. And it was very traumatic. She had to go to a nursing home. Eating was very difficult. And I knew why. She loves these kind of wedgie shoes that she's now a little wobbly on. Now she's 84. So even though she hated, I bought these, I think what she finds ugly, flat plastic sandals, but she has wide feet and they fit her. She doesn't like them, but I insist because I don't want another fall and her losing ability to feed herself. So that's a fight worth having. So, but that is a big thing I wish I had known back then, is what are the disagreements worth having? And also, wouldn't you be kind to a friend who is struggling and feeling bad about themselves the way you are feeling bad about yourself?
Absolutely. So what support did you find through this? Because, I was a caregiver for my father. I was in my early 20s. My wife and I, we were newlyweds, and it was going to be 4 to 6 weeks. It turned into 2.5 years, 24/7 care. It changed my entire life trajectory. But at the time, Alfredo, there was little support, little resources. They were there, but no, brand new, walking into this, very blissfully ignorant. I didn't know to look for them. I didn't know where to find them, and this is dealing with surgeons, nurses. We had home health care for months on end, but nobody ever said, oh, here's something that may help you. Here's something that may help your wife. Here's something that may help your father. Where were you finding the resources at? Like, I'm assuming after Jim passed and you started seeing, okay, that was more of a cryptic message. He's kind of tipping me off. You ultimately took mom to get a diagnosis, and then you got this diagnosis of potential early onset. Where did you find the help, the resources and support at that point? Because a good friend of ours who's kind of high up there in Washington, D.C. in this area, he says it's the phenomenon called diagnose and adios. You get a diagnosis and then you're on your way. That's so true for so many people. It's true for myself as well. How did you find these? What did you turn to?
I turned mostly to friends. So Lance, your experience of having this happen in your 20s, I mean, that's a young age.
Yeah.
To be dealing with a lot of these changes that are new and you're feeling lost. I'm 56, so among my peers, a lot of us are experiencing this. So the first thing to do was to open up and admit, chat with my friends and say, I just had this day with my mom and this is what happened. I tend to not be that kind of guy. I prefer to be, I'll take care of it and not talk too much about it. But when I did open up, no surprise, everyone else just was like, the floodgates were open. And so the first bit of support I got was not so much advice on how to be better, but was just to know that I wasn't alone. And that even that is helpful. And hey, listen, I wanted to back up, some of the stuff we've been talking about. I mean, you've been asking me questions about sort of the emotional part of it and feeling blindsided and all of that stuff. Did the stuff I've been saying ring true to you? And did you have these feelings and the, like I say, the guilt, the resentment, the anger, the then feeling good? I mean, literally the spin cycle of all this stuff. Did you have the similar experience?
So my experience, my father did not have dementia. He didn't have memory loss. What his was, and it made me angry. He was in the Marines in the 60s, Parris Island. It was a lot different than what it is now. There's a lot less government regulation and it was intensive. So he was invincible, had a great job, had a great retirement, tremendous government job. He had fallen one day and he'd fallen and landed on his tailbone, just kind of slipped, went right down. And that area gets sat, like we're sitting on that area now, right? There's always pressure there, so it never had the time to properly heal. And so that bruise never healed, and the bruise not healing developed into an abscess. And then the abscess had burst, and then that infection went into the bloodstream, got into his tailbone, and what was supposed to be one surgery, and then, like I said, 4 to 6 weeks of recovery, ended up being 7 major intensive surgeries. And wow. it was a spin cycle, but in the wrong direction, and it just spiraled out of control, and it ultimately led him to having to go into a nursing home for IV antibiotic therapies like every day, basically, and that we couldn't provide in the home, or he would have still lived with us. And you're right, you were in more mature years. I was in my early mid-20s, and my friends are like, "What are you talking about?" And so that was the difficult part. And I never even identified as a family caregiver. I just identified, maybe you as well, as a son doing what I'm supposed to do for a parent that needs my help. I'm helping my dad. You're helping your mom. The word caregiver never even entered the conversation until much, much later. And then you find out it's a whole pandemic out there of family caregivers lost without support. I think you're so fortunate, and I'm sure you agree with this, that your friends were experiencing similar situations, maybe not identical, but a lot of caregivers, if their family member, or if their friends in their social circle haven't had to go through that yet, you can be understanding from a distance, but you can't be truly understanding in close proximity because you haven't had to go through it. They can't understand having to make sure mom took pills and you're not sure if she got it or didn't get it. Those kind of things are just very traumatic. And I feel like families, like I said, this person coined that term, diagnose and adios. And we see it with our company, Alfredo. Families will call us all the time. Yeah, well, my mom has dementia. I think she needs help. The doctor said, they just don't know what they don't know. And I feel like so much of our healthcare system, and it may be slowly changing, but not quick enough, they kind of stay in their own silo. They don't branch into, well, okay, here's a prescription. This is a test I want to get. But they're not thinking about, what do I do to make mom eat at night? What do I do to get my dad to stop wandering? All of these things that come along with being a family caregiver. The healthcare system doesn't really look at it as a medical issue. It's more of a social issue. And so there's resources, and some doctors do, but for the most part, they just don't have any real helpful tips or suggestions when you're sitting there in that doctor's office.
Right. It's probably a handful of pamphlets that you go home with.
Yeah.
So I think one of the toughest things, and I would imagine it was especially tough for you being a younger man, is you feel with these feelings, the spin cycle of it all, there's a lot of isolation.
Yeah.
You feel, and isolation is not good when you're feeling angry and sad. So in your case, what did you do to deal with the isolation? Did you have, I don't know, maybe were you married at the time? You said
my wife and I were newlyweds. And
you were newlyweds, so just brand new.
Yeah.
So
it was tough. I mean, she was a great asset and a great help, but she had already graduated, and so she had already started her career. I was pursuing medical school, and I mean, I'm talking to people at the university, and like, oh, we're so sorry, but that's wonderful, and I appreciated that. But it made it very challenging. I was working in the labs. I was doing student teaching, plus all of my courses, and I'd have to go home because he needed breakfast or he needed lunch. It was very, very challenging. And the only part that I really resent specifically, but I don't fault anybody because you just do what you do and you don't know it's wrong if it's not told to you that it's wrong. Nobody ever said, have you thought about respite, or have you looked at these resources? There's this out there, there's that out there. That's how we started our company, 15 plus years ago. I left a friend going to have lunch with a friend one day, and I had taken, EMT training and paramedic training, all in preparation for med school apps, and a home healthcare company was hiring. So I stopped in there and I said, oh, what are you guys hiring for? Because I'm thinking, if I can make more money than minimum wage working at the university, I'm going to do it. And the person in the office had no idea what they were hiring for, what the qualifications are. Like, if I walked in, you're part owner of a cocktail bar, correct?
That's right.
If I walked in and I said, Alfredo, what are you hiring for? And you tell me, I don't know. Well, what do you need to work here? I don't know. That's not a very good representation of your business, right? And that's what these people were doing. Now, I doubt this person was the owner. So I left there and I called my wife. I will never forget the phone call. And I said, I have a great idea. She says, what's that? I said, we should start a company where we send people into the homes to help people like us. I'm sure there's a lot of them out there. Had no idea there's franchises and a multi-billion-dollar industry. But again, and that goes back to my point, I didn't know that because these doctors, nurses, social workers, physical therapists never shared that with us. Right. They never said, is there anything we can do to help you? Or is there any resources that could help you? Is there anything you need? And how simple and quick would it be to ask somebody that? And there's, 60 plus million family caregivers out there that are going through the same thing even this day.
Right. And something you said really struck me because I had the same feeling. You mentioned a minute ago that at the time when all this was happening, the multiple surgeries, your father, that you were just trying to be a son doing the right thing by your dad. That's exactly how I felt with mom before. And so in part of, I think a lot of my emotional turmoil came from feeling like I'm not being a good son. I really felt bad about that because I think she was a great mom. I'm like, well, can I be at least as good as my mom, toward her? Like now she needs me. And so until you've clicked over in your mind that you also have another role called caregiver, and caregiving, I don't know what it is, but when you see it that way, perhaps because it's less loaded than the word son and mom, it's not that I become detached and put on, a smock and carry food trays or something. No, but in my mind, it allows me a little more space to not expect to be perfect all the time, the way I might as a son. And I think I think when you mentioned that, that's how I felt, especially in the beginning.
Absolutely. And I think something also, at least in my opinion, I didn't have this with my dad because I never put on that caregiver hat, so to speak. But we hear from families all the time that we're helping. I want to start being the daughter again and not the caregiver, because I think there is a big contrast. As a caregiver, you have to be not tough or hard, but you have to be more like, no, this is what we need to do. This is what you have to do. As a child of that person, I think you still have that parent-child relationship, but I think it kind of reverses itself where the child becomes the parent and the parent becomes a child in a lot of cases.
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to Spin Cycle, I contributed a chapter to a book, an anthology called Wellness Through Words. And it's an anthology. So there's 25 different writers, each approaching healthcare or whatever is interesting to them from a different point of view. And the chapter I wrote is called Parenting a Parent, Entering Their Reality, which I think is another summary, I think, of kind of the feelings and the situation I have. I know it's like, yes, you do. It's hard. The roles are reversed. I definitely feel like I'm now the parent to my mom. And part of it is, and it comes out in some of the characters I wrote in the novel, which is some of them are just angry because they miss the banter. They miss the normal interaction between them and their mom, like the jokes you tell. Like it's at a certain point especially with dementia, verbal wordplay is maybe not there anymore. And you have to relate in a different way, visual or holding a hand or getting them their favorite. My mom, like her sweet tooth has gone off the rails in the last 5 years. Like we don't go to the store that she does. She loves those little Ferrero gold covered chocolate balls, and she loved Hershey's Kisses. And my mom never was a sweet tooth. I mean, she was, but when she was young, and this is a good place to put in some pictures, Lance, there's pictures of her like in a bathing suit and in a dress. So when she was young, she was very conscious of her figure, and she got made fun of a little bit for being a tiny bit chubby when she worked at an ice cream store. And since then was always very eats like a bird, and that's just who she is. But now she just loves her sweets again, and I get it because I got root canal to prove it. So but that sort of maybe the way you used to josh around and stuff that changes, and that part of the frustration is, oh great, so now sometimes this is the way I would say it. Sometimes I'm like, well, am I just the errand boy? Am I just there to take you to CVS, to the doctor, to Safeway for your favorite goodies, to get your nails done, and that's it? Like, what about just hanging out? Yeah. But then hanging out is now different, and I actually realized that okay, look, for her, the outing to CVS is now really exciting. It's a big deal. She's out and maybe she's going to see a baby if she's lucky. And so if I can just shift my own thinking to realize that, yes, for me, maybe it's an errand, but for her, it's an outing, a true outing. And maybe like in the best of all worlds, I can enjoy it too. Like I can enjoy that she's enjoying her decaf latte or whatever's going on. So it is though that shift in the roles and in the person, and that's also, I think, a challenging thing, and it's hard to accept. But if you can let that go, if you can kind of that's why I say entering their reality. If this is, and I you know what, I did this, and this is a great, I think a good parallel. So my son in high school, of course, teenagers are pulling away. I've got two sons; they're grown. But one of them, my older son, played football, and I didn't do any sports in high school. I wasn't that guy. In fact, I was probably one of those, snotty theater kids who looked down on the jocks. That was probably more me. But he loved football, just loved it. And I was starting to run out of ways to relate to him. He's a teenager. Now I'm just kind of wallpaper. I'm just the guy who provides a roof and food. So I realized, wait a minute, maybe I can learn to know something about football. So I ended up volunteering at his games. I would work the snack shack, or I would be I didn't know what the phrase meant. I would work the chain gang, moving the chains for every set of downs. And I started to get into it, and he loved Oakland Raiders. So I started to get into Oakland. We'd watch games together, and then I started to hate the Broncos, and I started to hate, the teams. And I was entering his reality because I wanted to keep that connection with him. So I realized I had to kind of do it in a way that he could relate to. I mean, we still had, I don't know, heavy metal music and sushi. We still had common points of interest, but this was so important to him, so it became important to me. So I realized, wait a minute, this is no different than what I need to do with my mom. If I want to still have certain points of connection, maybe I need to sit there and just enjoy a minute of watching puppies playing with babies on YouTube. And you know what? It is really cute, and it is really wholesome, and I kind of like it. And okay, let's do that. Yeah. So I'm like, well, what's the difference? There's no difference. It's all about just trying to connect with a person on their terms. Like, and especially if, in the case with older parents, if you maybe have a little bit more flexibility or ability just to shift and, and get into their world. Right. I mean, I just think you will be so much happier. And it'll seem such less of a burden. That's
a great analogy, Alfredo. That's really good. I'm going to use that in the future, just so you know.
Well, it really worked.
I want to briefly, because I know we're coming up close on the time here, but
man, that went fast.
One of the things I hear often, and I definitely understand, even with my father, even though it wasn't dementia, was anticipatory grief. And some speak of the ambiguous loss of caring for a loved one with dementia, loss without closure. How have you handled this sense of emotional limbo? Because, like you mentioned, some days are up, some days are down, some days mom recognizes you, some days she doesn't. Psychologically, even though we kind of maybe develop a little bit of tougher skin and almost like an immunity to it, we're still dealing with emotions, right? How have you handled this?
The best I can say on that, Lance, is that I trust that even if certain aspects are in limbo, if I can't have the same conversations that maybe I used to have with her, a little bit of what I was just saying, I do believe, and I've learned this just kind of through trial and error, that there are other ways to communicate with her that are still very meaningful. I mean, the simplest one is, when she gets in the car and we're going to drive to get the coffee, I'll hold her hand. And I'm not that touchy-feely of a guy. And for some reason, like with my mom, I'm just squirrely about it. I mean, I don't know why, but that's just me. But I've overcome that. Or her hearing isn't great, but if I play certain things loud enough. So for example, she wanted to go to church to hear some music. Now, what she means by music is she grew up post-war in a refugee camp where they had mass in Latin, and the monks were chanting in Latin. So that's what she wants to hear. I know I can't find that nowadays easily, but excuse me one second. Yeah. So normally 5 years ago, I would have said, Mom, no, we're not going to go. It's not going to be what you want. I know better. Believe me, it's not going to be the chanting. But I'm like, well, just go. So I went there, and my girlfriend Simone, who's been wonderful throughout all of this, came along with. So we go in there, maybe middle of the way mass through, and it happened to be that the acoustic guitar player, they were starting up. And I kept kind of glancing at my mom like, are you enjoying this? It's not what you really wanted. And maybe after 10 minutes, she was getting tired. We left. And as we were outside walking down the stairs of the church, she just turned and said, "Thank you. That was beautiful." And I was like, so the music. So I guess what I'm saying is there are fundamental things, music, sweets, holding hands, that kind of help cut through the ambiguous loss, the feelings of ambiguous loss. And just in those moments, I'm like, well, okay, yes, I'm a writer. Words are important to me. I like to joke around with people. Like, okay, maybe I don't have that so much anymore, but maybe I could learn to hold hands a little more better, hold hands more often. So to me, I think it has to do with this theme kind of entering the reality a little bit. Like, that's allowed me to kind of grieve the loss of some parts of our relationship while seeing that, as shocked as I am at this late stage in the game, in my view, new aspects of the relationships are like, the book is not done. There's chapters yet to be written, and I don't even know it. And the thing is, I don't even know what they are. So like on the best days, they're good, they're exciting, good chapters. Yeah. Sometimes rough chapters where I feel like where mom is being unreasonable or just something can't get through. That's also a chapter. But the fact that, and this is where when I think one of the big lessons, and I wonder if you felt this too, Lance, with your dad, is, man, you might think you know how tomorrow's going to be. You don't know. You have no clue, man. If you think, the more you plan and count on how things are going to be, the unhappier you will be. The more you can just be like, hey, man, tomorrow's a different day and we'll see what it is. And luckily, hopefully, I can adjust and pivot and find my best self in there. That's the best you can hope for, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Don't have expectations. Just
don't have expectations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's hard.
Yeah. I just want to admit, how is your mom today, Alfredo? Because this is 5 years you've been doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah. How is her?
She is in a very good place, both literally in a good place. So there was a time where I alone couldn't handle it. I couldn't. I mean, the trips back and forth, living with her for months at a time, having her up here, it was too hard. I couldn't, because one of the other things you learn is that, if I think if most parents had their druthers, they would, it's like, and I told this to my therapist, and she said, well, she said it in a great way. She goes, well, Alfredo, you can always do more. Like, I could tell her about the longest day I spent with my mom and all the things I did. She goes, oh, you could always do more. But she's joking, saying that's how your mom probably sees it. You could always be there more. You could put a cot next to her bed. That might be the thing that she wants, but it's okay not to do that. So that's one thing I had to learn. But no, and I think, but she's in a good place right now, Lance. And I think what it is there are people, and I think, by the way, there's some pictures in there that I sent you that you should look at. There are people, and I don't throw the word around lightly. There are people who are saints. These are people who have chosen the vocation of spending their days with older people, some with dementia, some in better shape than others, in worse shape than others. And the people I've seen who work there, they're not snippy. For them, this is day in, day out.
They're calling.
Yeah. They're calling, and it is amazing. It's the stimulation. So there are great things like, sure, my mom actually does love bingo, but there's also balloon badminton, which is as insane and fun as it sounds. You can be sitting in a wheelchair and with one balloon, just keep the other balloon up in the air. Like, I would like to do that. That sounds kind of fun. There are tea parties. They have two guys who come in with guitars once a week for happy hour, where they play oldies like Beach Boys or the Beatles or Aretha Franklin, what have you. And I see guys getting up with their walkers and kind of dancing around. It's the mental engagement. And my mom is a social person. Like I say, when back in the 70s, she is on Sierra Club hikes. There she is at Toastmasters. She's putting herself out. She's not kind of moping in the post-divorce world. She's like, nope, life goes on, and that's who she was. And I love that about her. And she is so resilient. To this day, she is so resilient. It was such a hard transition. And I think about it. Her spouse dies. She loses her driving privileges because of some cognitive issues. She can't get food anymore. She's reliant on other people. Then she needs to move up by me. Then she's moving into a home. Like, even under the best circumstances, that's traumatic. That's not easy. And then when you layer on top of it the loss of a loved one, and she has plenty of self-aware moments where she knows something's not quite right. And all that is so much to deal with. So I think a lot of it is just socializing. And now, so she may be like me with my friends, my 50-year-old friends. She's maybe with her 70 and 80-year-old friends there, and they can complain about, oh, I don't know, the food today was terrible, or my grandkids don't visit nearly enough. And at least he's bonding and connecting. And I think that level of stimulation, it's not that she's necessarily getting better, because from everything I read, it's not like you get better with it. But I think what's being addressed is perhaps some of the depression and grief around all the life changes in the last 5 years, and that some of that is now she's getting over it. And that is a part of the dementia and aging picture it's all in the soup together. So it's so hard to disentangle. So I'm very pleased to say that, like, great example. Yesterday, I was going to go see her. She wants to go see this statue in San Francisco. I don't know how she got it in her head, but in San Francisco, there's a statue of Tony Bennett, the singer. Okay. And actually, I believe he had dementia toward the end, but yes, I don't know why. My mom really got into it. Maybe she was a fan of Tony Bennett in the 60s, I'm guessing. But there's this statue, and she's been asking me for a long time, let's go see it. So it was New Year's Day, the 1st. I'm like, oh, there's probably no traffic right now. It's a great time to take her. I go there, all ready to take her. But one of these amazing, saintly, angelic caregivers, and I want to shout her out right now. Her name is Mariah. If I had to guess, she's 25 or 30. She's at a little card table where 3 of the residents are sitting, my mom included, and she's painting their nails. And my mom's waiting to have her nails done. And she sent me away. She's like, nah, we'll do Tony Bennett another time. That to me was I felt so good. That meant that she was I wasn't the only thing in her life. Right. That's number one, which is a load off my back. And that she was actually loving this. She was loving us. We will go to Tony Bennett sometime. I do promise that, when the traffic is good. But it was that and Mariah, the helper there, the caregiver, taking the time to, I feel like, go above and beyond and do this for the women. That's why right now, and the trick, Lance, is not to just to appreciate the day right now as it is, because you know what, I know this may not last forever, so I don't want to get frustrated and tear my hair out and do all that if things change with my mom at some point and she's not as happy and engaged as she is. But right now she is, and it's like, as long as I can kind of stay in the moment the way she does and then just appreciate it without expectation, like I'm talking to you right now in a good space. I'm happy. So long answer to your question is she's in a good space, and I think it's about mental engagement. I think it's about getting over the other stuff that's not necessarily just the dementia, and about wonderful people who are at my mom's home who chose to be there and love their work.
That's incredible, Alfredo. I want to, before we close, I want to ask you just a couple more questions. I want to ask about you. What impact has your role as your mom's caregiver had on your relationship with your girlfriend and family and coworkers? There's got to be some impact there. Maybe, hopefully it's all been positive, but I also understand, those roles as a caregiver, you could get a notice, you got to leave a meeting, or you might have had a date night with your girlfriend, but, something comes up, you got to go address it for your mom, Hopefully none of that, but it's also reality that those things happen. What's the impact been like?
Yeah, I mean, it's been mixed. So, and I think some of it is, it's not always just a question of needing to run off to take care of my mom. Some of it is just...
Or for just time for yourself.
It's the mood swings.
Yeah.
I might come home feeling great after a Tony Bennett episode, but I might also come home feeling snappy, moody, withdrawn, because I am ashamed that I was short with my mom, or that maybe I said we didn't have time to stop at CVS after Safeway because we forgot something that she wanted, and I just wanted to get home. So I lied. I said CVS is closed. And that's kind of crappy, because maybe I did have the time. I could have made that time, but I didn't, and I feel bad. So they might get that me, which is not a great me. So I think that's been a part of the challenge. And then some of it is though very literal, like, so not so much anymore, but there was a time where my mom really she was not so happy in the first residence she was in. So when I had meetings so I used to own 2 bars, I own 1 now. So we would have our weekly owner meetings before we opened up at 4. So I'd go down at 1 or 2, and I would bring my mom along. She just wanted to go. She would, maybe just kind of pace up and down. I think mostly it was just to be with me. Sure. But it was hard because there were a couple of meetings where for some reason she became very uncomfortable in this dark, strange place. And she's like, I have to go. I can't be here. Or I would take her to a dentist appointment. And so I would cut the meeting short, or I'd take her to a dentist appointment. And like 10 minutes in, something was maybe upsetting her about the dentist, or something about, maybe I don't know, maybe I don't even know what it was, but something was upsetting her to the point that the dentist was not willing to keep going. So I was like, well, now I'm gonna have to make another appointment or find another dentist who's willing to work with an older person with some challenges. So it has affected. On the happier side, it's what I said a little bit ago, which is that in my generation, especially, I think I'm part of the late sandwich generation. I still, my sons are grown, but I still have a relationship with them. So they're not teens in high school, but there still is that. But when I share my anecdotes and my feelings with them, they get it. They're like, oh my God, my mom's driving me nuts. You don't believe my dad's side. I told them this 1,000 times. It was like, oh yeah, isn't that so that's when you're not alone. And so in that sense, it's actually brought some friendships a little closer together. I think I think it's a general truth that when you don't try to put on a perfect facade, when you show a little bit of vulnerability, sure, people don't react. People who actually care, they don't reject you. They come in closer because they're like, oh, you too? Yeah, great. Yeah. So it's been a mixed bag in terms of my relationships and my work life outside of being a caregiver.
Okay. I think that's a true reality answer, right? I mean, it is what it is, and it's, there are those ups and downs. Before we part, just got a couple more questions. One, have you received any feedback from somebody about the book that really hit home for you? Like, you know what, they got it. This is what I hope for, or any feedback in general that has stood out that really meant a lot to you?
Absolutely. So I've sent the book out. There's a time where you send out to folks and you're hoping, you're hoping that they like it and will give you maybe a blurb that you put inside the book. And some of the blurbs that have come back, one word that keeps coming back is compassion. And that is the umbrella theme of this book. So everything that happens in the book, good, bad, the characters make choices, they do things. Ultimately, they're all struggling to become more compassionate. Because I think there's an element of compassion that it's good for you. I mean, you feel better. So I've gotten a lot of feedback saying, "Oh yeah, this is exactly." Alfredo is telling, like, the words are raw. Like other words that mean something to me are, "This book is raw, emotionally honest. This is exactly how it feels." Stuff like that really is special to me. And then where I really kind of held my breath is because I think this book has a foot both in the literary world and then also in the reality pragmatic world. Even though it's fiction, I think there's a lot. The point is, emotionally, it should resonate with people who are in a situation of being caregivers. So I sent it as well to people who are somewhat prominent in the field of dementia care. So one woman in particular, Judy Cornish, runs the Dawn Network.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with her?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
She was great. So I sent a cold email to her, and she read the manuscript. She gave me some thoughts before it was completed. She really took her time. She loved it. She was interested in it. And, I felt nervous because I felt like a little kid asking your teacher, "What do you think of my paper?" Because, they do this, they've done this for years. So she and two other pretty prominent people in the field, like professors and deans of this and that. And, they came back. One person, his name is Terry Davidson. He came back and said, "This is a book not about what happens after death, but before death." And I thought, wow, and then he had a couple nice things to say. And I'm like, yeah, this is all about the before time, and how do we get there? And so comments like that, about compassion, about honesty, about being emotionally true, because when I read something and I feel like the emotions are false, or that for some reason the author pulled their punches and didn't really tell it like it is, maybe they just didn't want to, or they felt that character wouldn't do that, or they just maybe felt like it was too raw and too embarrassing. I don't connect as well. Like when people are, I'm not alone in this experience. If you're honest about things, they totally respond to this. And so to hear the feedback that this resonated and was like, saying out loud the parts that they were thinking in their head. That is why I wrote the book.
No,
and it brought them some comfort. That's why I wrote it.
And that was, I'm assuming, the purpose of writing it, right?
Absolutely. So that just basically, I don't know if we said this or I should have said it. I think maybe you said it in the introduction, but this is the book I wish I had in the beginning, because then I would be like, oh, look, yes, you're flawed, but so is everybody else. And we're all just trying to get a little bit better. And we stumble plenty. But even trying, if you have good intentions and a decent heart, even the stumbles are okay. It's better than not trying at all. So that's what I wanted. And that's what I hope people who, when they begin this journey, are like, it's almost like I wish this was alongside the pamphlets in the doctor's office would be a little sack saying, oh, look at this book. You're not alone.
Right. No, that is so true, Alfredo. Where would you like people to go to purchase it or to learn more about you?
Sure. So I'm not sure when we'll air. So there's a couple different places where you can get the book. You can order it from Barnes and Noble, from Amazon, Amazon being a real basic outlet. And you're going to be able to find it in 4 different formats. There will be hardcover, there'll be softcover, there'll be an ebook, and there'll also be an audiobook. So however you like to take in books, podcasts, etc., there'll be a format for you. So you can do that. Another place, I think that's a great place, is my website. It's myname.com. So Alfredo Botello, it's a bit of a word soup, so I'll spell it. It's ALFREDO, B as in boy, OTELLO.com. And there you'll find the book. You'll find a little synopsis, a little sneak peek if you like, as well as links that'll send you right to Amazon to order the book. You can also order my other book. I have music playlists. I have bar flyers. I mean, this website is also, I designed it to be a little bit of a picture of me and my personality a little bit too, because I think that sometimes those websites are a little bit dry. But yeah, so I would say between the website and just looking up Alfredo Botello Spin Cycle on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you find your books, you will find the book.
And we'll have it up on the screen here as well as in the show notes.
Great.
Last question. Is there going to be a sequel to Spin Cycle?
I'm not in the planning of it right now, but that's only contingent upon what I experience. So in other words, if in 3 or 4 years, if I've had a whole new raft of experiences where I feel like, oh, here we go again, I want someone, because it is a spin cycle. And by definition, it happens over and over. So if there is a point where I feel like I've learned and experienced new things, where again I'm scratching my head going, man, I wish I had known this, the next 5 years down the road, there will be a sequel. So so hang on tight and we'll see what happens.
Well, I appreciate it, Alfredo. I asked that because, just in our conversation here and even in our prior conversation, in preparation of this today, I feel like you have a short time in this space right now, about 4 or 5 years roughly, but you have so much wisdom and just valuable insights that I think you could be a much, beneficial voice to caregivers everywhere if you stay in the space. I think you have so much to contribute that would be just really positively impacting people that really need that positive impact.
Thank you. And there are also maybe other vehicles for it. So I was approached after someone read a draft of Spin Cycle and said, oh, that's why I want you to write Wellness Through Words, the chapter in the anthology. That's nonfiction. So there you're going to get a piece of me doing nonfiction. So there may be other avenues besides fiction for me to continue this. And I think also what you just said a minute ago, which is I am only 4 or 5 years into this journey, and there may be, and there undoubtedly will be, other really big shifts and changes with mom that I will have to learn about and pivot and figure out. And I think life experience alone will throw up enough material for me to keep writing in whatever form it is, whether it's a memoir, an essay, or another novel.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate what you're doing now and wish you and your family and your mother all the best for the new year. And Alfredo Botello, author of Spin Cycle, Notes from a Reluctant Caregiver. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me. And let me send back to you, thanks for doing the work you do, because the fact that I wanted to say, this book, my other novel, of course, I'm passionate about too. no need to get into that right now. But this one, I'm a bit of a zealot because I really do think so many people are in my shoes, in our shoes, the shoes you were in. Let's not be shy about connecting. Let's not be shy about telling it like it is, because there is comfort and power and contentment there. So yes, so thank you. And thanks for the work you're doing, because I think it's incredibly important.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Alfredo. Have a great day.
Take care. You too.
Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. I'd also like to say thank you again to Alfredo Botello, the author of Spin Cycle, Notes from a Reluctant Caregiver. We look forward to seeing you next time here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.